All right, so back with another video. This time I want to talk about what has been going on in society, and I'm gonna have a greater conversation about this shit when I go live, which is probably gonna be sometime in the next couple days, maybe even tonight. But I want to talk about the uptick in violence that's taking place really all over the United States. Not only when it comes to gun violence, but I also want to point out the uptick in random stabbings that has taken place lately. There's been quite a few different incidents, probably a handful at this point, maybe probably more actually, but involving like mass stabbings that are going on. So the reason that I think this is important to bring this to light is that there needs to be a bigger conversation that includes not just the issue with gun laws and the issue with guns, but really, I think we need to start looking at the fact that this is not just an issue of guns and needing gun control. There is a greater issue going on, and that is the issue of challenges with mental health. Because the fact of the matter is, I think this is pointing to the universe or somebody greater trying to get us to open our eyes to the fact that this is not just an issue of gun violence. This is an issue of mental health. This is an issue of systemic concerns that have not been addressed or healed or fixed within the education system, within the workforce and the workplace, within government, within just really, I mean, we're talking about not resolving deeper issues such as homelessness, poverty, things like that. And I think that conversation needs to be started, and we really need to start looking at the reality of what's going on in America in particular. And I think people need to start really looking at the bigger picture, looking at this from more of a macro lens and understanding that it's not just the guns, it's not just the mental health, it's a greater issue of mental health being impacted by the setup of society, essentially, and the way that people are treated and the way that systems are run and the way that we have continued to maintain these unhealthy structures for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, or whatever, however long this bitch ass country has been fucking here, fucking shit up for people. So I think that's what I wanted to address today, is just that, you know, people look at these countries like, I don't even know where it is, over like Sweden or Norway or whatever, those countries, and they think, oh, you know, it's because they've just banned all the AK, whatever the fuck it is. It's because they've just banned all the guns and that's why. And it's like, no, I think there's something else that people are not really fully looking at, which is, why is it that in our country, so they've banned all the guns in Sweden and Norway, why are there not random mass stabbings going on there? I don't hear about mass stabbings going on pretty much anywhere, except for like majority of it has been happening in America. So why is that? I'll tell you why that is. Because the issue is not weapons, and the issue is not simply mental health. The issue is systemic. That is why, because nothing is being shifted or changed within these environments that are leading people to these places where they feel helpless, hopeless, powerless, which lead them to acting out in ways that hurt themselves and others. And I think that's what's not being considered, is that these other countries aren't having these issues because these other countries weren't built on narcissistic principles and values. These other countries weren't built on racism and sexism and violence. America was created based on a certain group of people with a lighter pigment or shade of skin who chose to come here and murder the people that were already here and bring people here to abuse them and torture them and murder them and hurt them and rape them. And this country was built on the backs of slaves, which means this country was built under the guise of violence. This country was created through violent means. And I think people really don't understand the implications of that and how that carries on into the future and present. It's called epigenetics, people. Look that shit up. How we behave presently impacts future generations. These fucking idiots who don't understand that and want to say that, oh, well, what does slavery have to do with today? Well, motherfucker, slavery has everything to do with today. It's the reason you see Black families still struggling to have cohesiveness within their individual family units. It's why you see a lot of times single mother homes, because when you go back to slave times, what happened is that the nuclear family was separated in the midst of these fucking sickos using human beings like cattle, and even worse than cattle, treating them like they weren't even human. So one of the things that would happen is that families were separated. A lot of times mothers and children were even separated. Sometimes they stayed together, but 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, men and women, husbands and wives, partners, men and women who were partners were separated. So the man would go off and be completely separated from his family. And a lot of times the mother of families was also separated from the children. And so that over time of that happening over and over and over again creates a certain dynamic that then gets passed down generationally, because the way that society was set up and continues to be set up is in such a way that doesn't allow for Black Americans to have the same type of peaceful nuclear family that maybe other people who look different than that do, or whatever, so-called white families or whatever other families. And that is because even to this day, there are certain barriers in society and things that are set up that create a dynamic to where, for example, men, Black American men in particular, are not given the means, resources, and same opportunities, and therefore can't really ascend into full manhood, essentially. If you don't have the opportunities, you don't have the resources, how can you fully live that out? And therefore, how can you then provide and protect your family or even have a family, because you can't even make it to that point because you don't have the resources, you don't have the opportunity and the option. And so that's why a lot of times you see families being broken up and you see a lot of single parent homes, because again, you go back to slave days and a lot of what would happen is these slave masters would not allow marriage within African American family units. It was not allowed. They would literally not, they would have to ask, and it was not allowed. So my point is, it's important. History is extremely important, and understanding even epigenetics and how that then carries down in generations. It's in your blood. What happened back then is impacting present behavior because of not evolution, but I don't know. There's science behind it. I just know that for sure. And when it comes to epigenetics, that's like if you live a certain experience and you don't heal that, then that just keeps getting carried down generation and generation and generation. That's why sometimes you see, like, for example, if one person or if a woman ends up, or rather a child ends up having kids at a young age or as a teenager, that's why oftentimes you'll see that pattern repeated. And this is just one example. That this can happen with alcoholism. This can happen with really anything, but I'm just using this as an example of that's not that uncommon then to see the next generation, if you have a daughter, her also being a young parent, or if there was sexual assault or rape. That's why sometimes you will see that happening generation after generation because of the experience that was maybe not healed, or just the experience that was had by the mother or the father or whatever it was. So my point in saying this is we need to understand not only mental health, but also history and also science, and also how this is then carried down in our DNA sequence to impact how we are engaging with people today, present day. And I think a lot of people are ignorant to this. And so people don't recognize how the way that society was built is presently impacting the dynamics within society. And that's basically what what we're seeing now is these things haven't been healed. And it's not just with racism and slavery. It's, like you see in the workforce, just in general, people are not really valued. They're not treated very well. People are treated depending on what position you have and what job you have and things like that. People are not being given the proper means and the proper opportunity and resources in order to live peacefully and be able to, again, have the same ease as other people. And so I think a lot of times, first off, it's that, but also if you look at epigenetics and you look at how, like, if things aren't healed, that can lead to further issues down the line, people, because I think the other thing with this is, like, nobody is born a narcissist. Nobody is just born that way. Yes, you can be born a psychopath, but with these narcissistic ideologies and principles, these are things that are taught. And so they're taught based on the systems that we've built. They're ingrained within all of the systems we have built. So for example, the education system has a certain curriculum that we must follow or whatever. And that's been a huge thing lately that people are, pushing back against. And unfortunately, our education system, our curriculum promotes narcissistic ideologies and principles because it's not telling the full story. When you look at critical race theory, which is really just, hey, teaching our kids about racism and that this is a real thing and this is something that Black Americans have experienced for hundreds of years, and hey, it's important to recognize this and be aware so that we can heal it and have empathy, not only for others, but also just amongst one another. It helps to create a sense of empathy, and people are pushing back against that because of the shame that might be coming up or the guilt that might be coming up. And again, that's narcissism, and not choosing to create accountability around that by saying, hey, you know what? If kids feel guilt and shame when they're being taught about this in school, that's also something to address. We're teaching history not to create guilt and shame, but so that people understand where we come from and what has been done so that we can do something different. It's called taking accountability and healing that sense of entitlement that has been created surrounding, in particular, people with who are so-called white or whatever in the society. And it's facing those things and teaching about those things and creating connectivity around it. But the issue is that, fighting against that and not allowing us to teach what has actually happened just breeds more narcissism because we're refusing to look at what's happened and take accountability and say, hey, yeah, that was fucked up and this continues to be fucked up. And what can we do to help it be less fucked up for other people? We're not doing that. And so this goes deeper than just, oh, this is a mental health problem in the United States. This is not just a mental health issue. This is like a foundational issue. This is like a, let's go back to the beginning and look how the fuck this thing started issue. And how do we shift that? How do we shift? And the fact of the matter is, because humans are not choosing to do it on their own, it's falling apart regardless, if that makes sense, because as mindsets change and shift, dynamics shift with that. And if there's a lot of people fighting against it, it can make that kind of a messy process. And I feel like that's what we're in right now, but we're not addressing it appropriately, which is why we're seeing all of these stabbings and shootings and random murders and uptick of violence, because you can only shove these things down for so long until they come to the surface. You can only try to oppress people for so long before that awareness comes about and people realize what's going on. And so I think the other thing that's happening is there's a shift in consciousness that's taking place, which is also leading people to these places where they're lashing out in ways that are not healthy or that are hurting themselves or others, because these things are coming up, people are becoming more aware, and people feel helpless and powerless and they don't know what to do because they're more aware, their consciousness is coming about, but these systems are not shifting in the way that they need to be. And so people are still stuck in these old dynamics and infrastructures, which with these new mindsets. We're in the age of Aquarius. We were just in Piscean times for quite some time. And in the age of Aquarius, there's an advancement in technology and an advancement in thinking and forward thinking. And look at the combination. You have forward thinking, but you're still trapped in these old structures and dynamics that were created during Piscean times. So there's that edge and there's that friction that's created because the mindsets are shifting, but the structures are pushing against that. And so basically what I'm saying is the resolution for this is really starting to look at these systems and structures and breaking them down and recreating them to fit where we are at mentally with our mindsets. So, for example, and I'm not going to go too far onto this, I'll talk about this more in the live, but for example, creating work environments where there's more of an open space to actually talk and be real and say, hey, I feel like shit today. I feel like I'm being treated shit like this manager. What can I do about it? Having social workers who are actually healthy, who can tap in and talk to people in the workplace, having support groups set up where hey, somebody's going to listen to me. If I feel like I'm not being treated well, I'm going to be listened to and something's going to change here. Knowing that there's an outlet and a place where you're not only going to be heard, but you're going to be seen, and on top of it, somebody's going to do something about it. Because I think that's a lot of what's going on, is that people are in these, shifting their consciousness since the pandemic. There's a lot of uptick in conscious awareness in people. And so I think that's what's leading to this discomfort and this tension as well, that's bringing about more violence, because the mindsets are changing, like I said, but the physical, the outer experience is not. And so people feel trapped. And so we've got to find a way for people to be able to break free from that and be heard and seen, and actually do things to reshape society and reshape structures to fit the new mindset instead of keeping us stuck in the old. So yeah, that's just my short spiel now. I will have more to say later, but I think that's one of the main issues. Is it's not just one thing. It's not just guns that we need to ban. This is a greater issue, a deeper issue that started hundreds of years ago, and we need to start addressing it now. We should have started addressing it a long time ago, but we can't keep sweeping it under the rug, or we're going to keep seeing shit like this happening until we finally face it.